Old Hollywood was once the promised land of glittering dreams, where stars shone brightly on the silver screen and audiences everywhere believed that life behind the lens was always full of happiness. But tonight, as I sit here in the studio of Ryan's Hollywood Uncovered, I'm about to lead you through that vibrant layer of makeup to touch the most silent pains. A famous father watched his son stop breathing in the backyard swimming pool, and just a few hours later was still forced to step up to the radio microphone to keep smiling for the whole country. That wasn't a movie script. That was the harsh reality that old Hollywood tried to bury under its glamour. Today we're going to uncover the dark chapters about the most famous parents in the entertainment industry, those people who had to carry losses that would never heal, even as the camera flashes kept going off non-stop. These stories were kept hidden for decades, only leaking out through a few cold police reports and rare biographies. But I promise you, when you finish listening, you'll look differently at those legendary faces. If you want me to dig deeper into any other movie, TV show, or Hollywood secret, just comment right below. And I'm Ryan. Please like and subscribe to the channel to start exploring the main content of this video with me. Veronica Lake, William Anthony. Let's start with a sharp icon of the 1940s, Veronica Lake. On screen, she was the embodiment of mysterious allure, with her peekaboo hairstyle covering one eye constantly on magazine covers, starring in blockbuster films that captivated the entire nation. People called her the face of wartime, a symbol of style and talent. But behind that glittering halo was a shock that shook her entire life to its core. In 1943, right at the peak of her career, Veronica tripped over an electrical cable on the film set. That fall not only caused physical injuries, but also made her go into premature labor just a few hours later. Her firstborn son, William Anthony Detley, was born too early, so weak that he had to be placed in an incubator. The doctors did everything they could, but the boy only survived for 7 days. On July 15, 1943, William Anthony passed away forever at just 7 days old. The press at the time only reported it briefly and coldly, as if a star's pain also had to stay within polite boundaries. The child's father was on the battlefield, thousands of miles away, and Veronica's marriage began to crack just a few weeks later. By August, they separated. By December, the divorce papers were finalized. I think sometimes tragedy doesn't just take away a tiny life, but also drags along relationships that were already fragile. Veronica still continued to shine in front of the public, but deep down, she never really recovered. The image of that empty cradle those days, etched deeply in her memory, became a ghost that followed her for the rest of her life. There were no grand public condolences, no tearful interviews, just the stoic silence of a woman who had to pull herself together in front of the cameras while her heart was shattered. That was the kind of wound that classic Hollywood never allowed to show under the stage lights. Charles Boyer, Michael Boyer. But if you think Veronica's pain was enough to make you shudder, then prepare yourselves for Charles Boyer's story, because it's even darker in a completely different way. This time, we don't start with the glamour. We start right at the most horrifying moment. In the early morning of September 23, 1965, Charles Boyer's only son, Michael, 21 years old, passed away right in the family home from a gunshot wound. The news reports at the time used very careful wording, describing it as an accident, but the family knew better than anyone. There was only one harsh reality. Their only son, the one they had raised with all their hopes and love, was gone. Charles Boyer was the model of European sophistication, a respected actor with a long marriage, a stable family image, and no scandals. He had never let the public see any cracks. But this loss wasn't just a wound, it was an entire world collapsing. When you lose your only child, you don't just lose a part of your life, you lose the future, the bloodline continuing on. And then the second wave hit. Public opinion started making up stories, speculating, analyzing, trying to turn an unsolvable pain into a logical narrative. But for the parents, there was only one single, unchangeable truth. Michael was gone. Charles still maintained a calm appearance in public, still that polite gentleman. But from that moment on, his life became nothing but endurance. Every role he played after that, every smile on the red carpet, carried a thin shell covering a void that nothing could fill. I can't imagine the strength it must have taken to keep living when the most important part of you had disappeared forever. Stan Laurel. From Boyer's pain, we move to another story, one that's short but haunting. It's Stan Laurel's story in 1930. Imagine a cold winter night in Hollywood. Stan Laurel and his wife had just welcomed their firstborn son, also named Stanley. The boy was born about 2 months premature, so weak that the medicine of that time could only give up. He lived for just 9 days, 9 short days, to the point that the medical records were almost empty, leaving only cold numbers on paper. There was no long explanation, no clear cause, other than the limitations of the era. Their home hadn't even had time to fill with a baby's cries before sinking into deadly silence. The pain didn't affect the two people equally. Stan and his wife gradually grew apart through silences, silent blame, and indescribable exhaustion. Their marriage fell apart in the 1930s, but the scar from Stanley's death ran deeper than any divorce. In front of the cameras, Stan Laurel remained the master of silent comedy, still bringing roaring laughter to audiences. He still performed with precision, down to the millimeter, still kept the humorous rhythm without any decline. But behind that, deep down, he carried a void that nothing could make up for. The Hollywood machine still demanded smiles on time, while his family had to bear that loss for the rest of their lives. That was the kind of contrast that makes me, Ryan, still feel heartbroken every time I research it again. Lou Costello, Louis Francis Costello Jr. And then we come to one of the stories that made me pause the most while preparing this video. It's Lou Costello in 1943. He was the king of comedy, the man who made the whole of America laugh, along with Bud Abbott. But on November 4th, 1943, his 1-year-old son, Louis Francis Costello Jr., affectionately known as Butch, suffered a horrific accident. The boy fell into the swimming pool in the backyard of their home in Van Nuys. A tragic accident. No crime, no mystery. Just a normal moment, turning into a tragedy in an instant. The reports at the time recounted the details in a way that sent chills down the spine. But what happened next was what I couldn't believe. That same day, Lou Costello had a scheduled radio broadcast with Abbott. Cancel. Postpone. Hand it over to someone else. No, he refused all of that. Just a few hours after burying his son, he still walked into the studio. Can you imagine? His partner only dared to mention the tragedy after the show ended, as if the comedy had to finish before the real pain could set in. Lou continued his career, still delivering roaring laughter, still signing contracts and keeping a packed schedule. But his home from then on became a place full of painful memories. Work became a life buoy, so he wouldn't collapse in front of the public. Trust me, when you listen to those radio recordings today, you'll hear a thin layer of humor covering a deep, profound pain. That was the kind of courage that I think many of us would find hard to muster. Lili, Damita, Sean Flynn. If you're already feeling heavy, then stay with me, because even darker secrets are waiting ahead. From the pain of losing infants and sudden accidents, we move to a tragedy that dragged on for many years, a weight with no ending. It's the story of Lili Damita and her son, Sean Flynn. Sean initially tried his hand at acting like his father, Errol Flynn, but then he left Hollywood to become a war photographer. On April 6, 1970, he went missing along with his colleague Dana Stone in Cambodia. They weren't traveling with a convoy. They were riding a motorcycle alone on Route 1. According to witnesses, they stopped at a temporary checkpoint. A white sedan blocked the road, and then they disappeared after talking to some other journalists. No confirmation, no grave, only horrifying theories. Kidnapped, held captive, taken somewhere deep in the jungle. Lili Damita poured all her money and effort into the search. She hired detectives, followed every lead, even used unofficial channels. But nothing. In 1984, she had no choice but to ask the court to declare Sean legally dead in absentia. That wasn't closure, just a legal document in place of hope. Her pain was the pain of years waiting for a son who was only left in the word missing. I think nothing is more cruel than not knowing where your child is, whether alive or dead, and having to live with that uncertainty for the rest of your life. John Garfield, Catherine. Cathy Garfield. John Garfield stepped into the Hollywood spotlight like a vibrant storm of raw emotion. Not the kind of star that studios polished, but a real man with roles full of power and a heart always on the edge. He brought to the screen those intensely masculine characters people pushed to their limits, and audiences loved him for that authenticity. But on one afternoon in March 1945, everything changed in just a few short minutes. His daughter, Cathy Garfield, just 6 years old, had just come home after a normal day. No signs of prolonged illness, no warnings at all. The little girl suddenly had severe difficulty breathing from a serious allergic reaction. The family plunged into emergency in a flash. Panicked screams, desperate rescue efforts, and then silence took over. Cathy passed away immediately. No time to prepare, no chance to say goodbye. Only a horrifying void that parents couldn't fill. John Garfield, who always showed strong emotions on the film set, now had to face real pain that no script could describe. He never really recovered. Later biographies about him all mention the same detail. Cathy's death broke something deep inside him. Even though he continued making films, still faced public pressure and the political troubles of the time, his eyes from then on carried a layer of fog that wouldn't lift. I think when you lose a child so suddenly like that, you'll forever rewind that final moment in your head, wondering if just one more second could have changed everything. Hollywood back then didn't allow stars to stop and grieve. The cameras kept rolling, contracts kept getting signed, and John had to carry that loss like a private secret that only he knew the weight of. Roy Rogers, Robin Elizabeth Rogers. If you think Garfield's sudden pain was enough to make your heart tighten, then come with me to a family that the public once saw as the perfect model of old Hollywood. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans looked like the golden couple of the Western screen. Radiant smiles, warm family films, images bonded with their children, and strong faith. They were symbols of optimism, of happily ever after stories on the silver screen. But behind that were two wounds so deep they changed their entire lives forever. In 1952, their biological daughter Robin was born with Down syndrome and serious heart problems. The little girl only lived for less than 2 years. As her second birthday approached, Robin got the mumps, and her condition deteriorated rapidly from complications piling on top of her already weak congenital health. Dale Evans later wrote an entire book called Angel Unaware about her daughter, not for PR, but to heal and to affirm that the little girl had been loved completely despite her short life. Then, in 1964, tragedy struck again. Their adopted daughter, Debbie, who was 12 at the time, was killed in a church bus accident near San Clemente. The bus, carrying dozens of children from a charity trip, lost control and crashed horrifically. Roy was in the hospital at the time, recovering from neck surgery, while Dale could only repeat in shock she heard the news, but couldn't accept it. After Debbie's death, the whole family had to move because the familiar roads, the old house, everything became unbearable. Ghosts. They chose to leave, to find a new beginning, even though they knew the pain didn't follow geography, but lived right in the heart. That was the kind of loss that makes me stop and wonder how those people could still keep smiling in front of the cameras while their private world had shattered like that. Red Skelton, Richard Skelton. From the Rogers family's story full of consecutive losses, we move to Red Skelton, the man who, on screen, always radiated warmth and calm, as if he brought the safety of an ideal father to audiences. He was a comedy master with a gentle smile and light stories that made all of America feel like everything was still okay. But behind that, his family lived to the rhythm of the hospital. His 9-year-old son Richard was diagnosed with leukemia, and the doctors gave a very grim prognosis. Red was advised to pause his work and spend time with his son. He chose the opposite. He returned to the studio because he believed that only work would help him stand firm to be a support for his son. After the diagnosis, the whole family took a long trip around Europe, not for vacation, but so Richard could see the world before it was too late. They even had the chance to meet Pope Pius XII in the summer of 1957, a sacred moment recorded as a rare bright spot in that journey. But the London press was too intrusive, and the family was forced to return home earlier than planned. Richard passed away on May 10, 1958, just 10 days before his 10th birthday. After that, Red Skelton changed. He still hosted the show, still kept the humorous rhythm, but the family stories he used to tell naturally on television almost disappeared. Close relatives said he suffered additional physical shocks, injuries, serious illnesses, constant hospitalizations, as if his body couldn't handle the mental burden anymore. I believe that for Red, work wasn't just a profession, but the way he clung to life when everything around him seemed to be collapsing. That was the silent strength of a father who had to keep smiling while his heart was shattered. Charlie Chaplin, Charles Chaplin Jr. Charlie Chaplin, the legend of silent film, had a son named Charles Chaplin Jr. He wasn't just the son of an icon, but someone who tried to build his own career. Charles Jr. took part in acting, published a memoir in 1960 called My Father, Charlie Chaplin, where he tried to explain the father-son relationship and the pressure of carrying the Chaplin name. But on March 20th, 1968, in Santa Monica, he passed away at the age of 42 from a pulmonary artery blockage, a sudden blood clot that took his life. This wasn't the death of a frail child, not a childhood accident. This was an adult son living his own life, and then, in just one day, everything stopped. When parents lose an adult child, that pain carries the feeling that the future family line has been cut off. You can't tell yourself that the child was too young or that luck hadn't come yet. Your child had grown up. Your child was still alive. And then, your child was no longer. Charles Chaplin Jr. left behind memories, books, small roles. But for the family, it was a void nothing could replace. The funeral papers, the items to pack up, the calls that would never ring again. All of them were knife cuts that no one could prepare for in advance. Now, as we've gone through this journey together, I hope you feel something different when you think about old Hollywood. It's no longer just the bright lights and perfect smiles. Those were real people with real hearts and real losses. They paid the price with the greatest pain of human life to bring joy to us. And the deepest lesson I drew after months of researching these stories is cherish your family right now, today. Don't wait until you lose them to realize it. Hug your children tighter. Say words of love more often, because life has no backup script. Fame can fade, money can run out, but the love given to your children is the only thing that never disappears. These stars have taught us that no matter how much glamour there is, people are still people, fragile, vulnerable, and in need of love. Thank you for joining me in this emotional video. If these stories about them have touched your heart, please like the video right now to support the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any upcoming classic Hollywood secrets. And most importantly, comment below and let me know which star moved you the most, or who you want me to dig deeper into next. I read every comment and will pick the best suggestions for the next video. Thank you for being part of Ryan's Hollywood Uncovered. We'll meet again in the next video where I continue to brush away the dust of time to reveal more buried secrets. Keep your smile, but also make room for tears, because that's real life. See you soon.